a special edition of the Carolina Group, a special edition of the Carolina Weather Group, all about Tropical Storm Debby, coming up right now. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Carolina Weather Group. I'm Jared Smith, joined by Joseph Navin out of Greensboro. We're going to kind of tag team on a whole lot of Debby. Tropical Storm Debby, on the verge of becoming Hurricane Debby, is making its way up the gut into Florida right now. Let's just take a quick look at what that looks like, and there you go. There's the center of circulation with Debby there. Getting close to Tampa, getting close to Jacksonville, some tornado warnings spinning up around it. We're actually starting to see some rain begin on the outer fringes of the storm now, moving into Savannah, into the low country of South Carolina. So we're keeping an eye on that. It's going to be an interesting few days here. That is for sure. So let's take a peek at the advisories here. So this is the 8 o'clock advisory from the National Hurricane Center. As I mentioned before, Debby is up to 70 miles an hour with gusts to 75. So this is on the verge of becoming a hurricane. You can see the hurricane warnings now into the Big Bend of Florida. And that looks like where there's going to be a landfall overnight early tomorrow. And then you can notice, if you take a peek just at that path, you notice it stalls out and slows down. We've been talking about this, it feels like, until we're blue in the face. But this is certainly the main deal here. This is the main concern, because we have a significant risk for historic rainfall. Some spots that, we've been talking a lot about 2015, October 2015. There are some spots that, how do I put this? There are some spots that did not get really much of anything in that October 2015 event. If you were like south of Charleston County, Hilton Head, things like that, you got some rain, but it wasn't that bad. But this time the epicenter is going to be Savannah, Hilton Head, to Charleston. So a lot of rain queued up, 20, maybe 30 inches possible in some spots. That is not hyperbole. That is absolutely possible. And so what we're going to do is again, here's the official track. You'll notice that it goes, the track takes it all the way up into Florida, stalls it out in Georgia. It meanders for several days. It feels like, it is several days before potentially getting back out over the water, maybe gaining a little steam before another landfall very near Charleston, South Carolina, and then moving very slowly up into the PD as a tropical depression. And this is going to spread a lot of that rain northward too. So that is going to be something that we're going to want to watch. And again, right now, if you take a look at the tropical alerts, I've got them overlaid here. We have Berkeley and Charleston counties in a tropical storm watch, but we also have a storm surge warning now in effect. And this goes along the coast. This goes along the South Carolina coast here, all the way up South Santee, Charleston, down towards Edisto and beyond. So this is going to also include you folks in Hilton Head and others, Beaufort, those areas. So we have a storm surge warning here. About 2 to 4 feet of storm surge is possible in the low country of South Carolina. And it, and depending on the way this thing moves, we could see these watches and warnings extended upward a little bit further up the coast, but we'll wait and see. Again, it looks like if you are generally north of the Santee River, you're probably going to be you're going to be in the northeast quadrant, but you may not be getting quite the focused surge. You might just be far away enough from the center to deal with that. So Again, it's going to be one of those situations where we've got a lot of moving parts here. There's still a lot of uncertainty. This is a great question. Getting a question here from Wesley Clark over on YouTube, and right out of the gate, I see the European and GFS models disagree quite a bit looking into Thursday and Friday. And any thoughts on which model usually is more accurate with large systems and hurricanes? So that's a really good two-parter. They're going to disagree. I think that's the one thing that's been the trouble the entire time. When you have a stalling system, any slight, perturbation in the steering currents can set it all off. Could throw off the forecast in very interesting ways. And so that's why we are seeing a lot more model disagreement than normal. And that's why we are being very, cognizant of the risk for flooding, not just in the Charleston metro, but all the way up into North Carolina. And that is going to be a concern. Now, the greatest risk obviously is going to be in the low country of South Carolina, which is not awesome for me down here, but that's the way this is going to go. And for this storm, it's been interesting. The GFS has actually had a somewhat better handle on this storm to this point. But again, we don't look at one, we look at many models. Some have, others have, strengths and weaknesses, and we blend all that together into the forecast. So, it used to be King Euro was kind of the way to go, but that is no longer really the case. So Joseph, I'm going to bring you in here, and let's talk quickly. There's a lot going on down here in South Carolina. We'll go through some maps and talk about that. But I'm curious, what you're hearing up towards Greensboro. I mean, you've got flash flood warnings very near there. There's been flash flooding there near there last night. There was flash flooding in Raleigh last night. So there's plenty of water already on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the wind and potential surge is definitely far out, not at all under our concern compared to Charleston, which, if you've ever been there, that's, there's so many different areas that flood like just a high tide or whatever. But here, we were in a drought every other month. It's been kind of weird this year. Like one month has always been extremely dry, and then the other month has been usually extremely wet. And it's basically, if you look at the charts throughout the state of North Carolina, at least central North Carolina, that's how it's been. It's been very uneven. And I don't have it with me, but that's how it's been over the last couple months. And this the month of July mainly into this last couple of days here. It's the 4th, so last 3 days here now in August have been exceptionally wet. At least 5 inches. I was out on vacation myself with family and recently, and I think we had like 5 inches in a night. I mean, on a night, but at least over a couple of days. And the ground's really saturated here. I mean, not like it's also dried up a little bit, but it's fairly saturated ground. So that's probably the biggest impact we'll probably have is 4, 6, maybe inches of rain. I'm ballparking those numbers, but that amount of rain on top of the already fairly wet ground we already have probably the biggest impact that I think that North Carolina will likely have. So just the rain itself is our probably biggest problem, because we just had so much rain the last month that this is just there's not a lot of more places the water can go at this point. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of us in the South are going to be dealing with that over the next several days. And again, be be grateful that some spots in North Carolina might only get 10 inches of rain as opposed to 20 or 30. I mean, that's just a crazy thing to think about. 5 to 10 inches of rain is still a really significant number. But with the center stalling where it is, I mean, you're not going to see the worst of this for a few more days. Now, tornado threat could be interesting, especially as we get into the PD and especially as the depression lifts north as it weakens there. But and again, this could be a pretty widespread event. We were talking about this last night. This could be a very widespread event, and it's going to, it could affect the Midlands of South Carolina. It could get into the Piedmont of North Carolina. I mean, who knows? I mean, depending on the track of the storm, we may get some upslope flow that could cause some interesting problems into the mountains even. So we have to watch this because, again, there's a lot of uncertainty here that, that we're rather concerned about, and is something that I want to, that we just got to pay close attention. That's just the way this has got to go.
I do
So
know one of the water supply dams around. There's a lot of them in North Carolina, but one of them around Raleigh let a little bit of water out in advance of all this. So
yeah,
in advance of all the rain. So I think in advance of this itself. So that's the kind of small things. But I mean, I noticed I went over the Yadkin River a couple of days ago, and that was fairly high. So I think just there's not a lot of places the water can go already. So
yeah. Well, we're just gonna, again, we're just batten down the hatches, right? Just get ready for, hope folks know where they should go in case flooding occurs. Hopefully, folks are getting sandbags and have got stocked up on supplies for a few days, because, again, this is the kind of thing that could close businesses. This is the kind of thing that could cause actually quite a bit of issues. Now, normally, when we get tropical systems this far north, typically they're on the way out. They're moving along. They're moving along at a nice pace. That's not the case here with Debby, not at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the model guidance here, because I want to show. Don't want to do that. Let me go to the. I'm going to switch my map to the model guidance here. We're going to switch on over to the maps. Take a peek at this, and again, here's the GFS model. This has been a pretty accurate model. Truth be told, this has been a pretty straightforward model for most of this. So we've got to zoom on the Carolinas here. If you're watching on the Charleston Weather Instagram page, you should be able to see this directly above me. Hopefully you can. Thank you for watching, and we're working out, still working out the kinks of some of this cross-posting stuff. So, but no worries there. So let's set it into motion. So here we are. It is, this is basically as of 11 o'clock tonight. This is what the model believes. This is the 18Z run of the GFS. This is not the most recent run of the GFS, but it certainly is going to do the job. We're waiting on that 0Z run to come in, but I have a feeling it's going to stay pretty consistent. The models have stayed very consistent now over the last 24, 36, 48 hours as far as what they believe, how this is going to evolve. So this is certainly something that we're going to want to keep a close eye on as time goes on. So looking at the model and advancing it forward here, you can see that eye wall producing some very intense 6-hourly rain rates getting into Tallahassee. And that eye wall will diminish over time. You can see the storm is kind of, zoom out a little bit. Here's that break in the ridge, and storm's just kind of going right up the gut. But what we're going to have to watch out for is this high pressure beginning to nudge in and is basically going to cut off the circulation. It's going to cut. Debby is just going to get cut out of the equation here on the circulation. So again, this is getting into Tuesday, and while the model doesn't look so bad, you can see that it's there's periods of a very enhanced rainfall in the Carolinas. This is also a lower resolution model, so the higher res stuff usually gets us a little bit better. Let me see. I don't like using that model for this. Yeah, I don't think that's. But you can also see here is that the GFS, you can see how it's wandering off. Now, keep in mind, now I've just moved forward to Wednesday. So this is Wednesday, and you can see that we've not had a lot here. This is a 6-hour rainfall accumulation. So you can see it just keeps raining and raining and raining. Yeah, there's going to be some breaks, but when it rains, it's going to pour. And that's certainly what we're concerned about here. And you see this is going to keep going and going. It looks like the model's identifying another maxima again in northern Florida. Certainly a possibility. Again, flood watches are up all over the place, all over the southeast for this exact reason. And only by getting into the weekend, we finally start to see some drift of this out of here. Now, this model is actually drifting it west. That's a bit of an outlier scenario. We do believe that it is going to catch another trough here and recurve, maybe a little bit sooner than that. But it kind of illustrates the issue is that we're going to be dealing with Debby for days. That's just the long and short of the situation. I wish I had better news on that front, but we're just going to be dealing with Debby for days. If I put on the high-res rapid refresh here, let me zoom in, and got a little bit more of a runtime on this. The 0Z run is coming in right now, and this is, you can see that higher resolution is showing us a little bit better detail with the rain bands here. And according to the high res, we should be really getting into some of these heavier rain bands tomorrow. In fact, there's some rain coming ashore in the Charleston area as we speak, but the Charleston low country area is going to start getting into those rain bands beginning tomorrow. There's some streaks of very heavy rain. And again, this is going to be different from the October event in that this is happening further south. There's going to be plenty of rain into the PD as well. So again, areas around Conway, areas around Myrtle Beach, folks like that, you're going to have to keep a close eye out for the potential for flooding. That is certainly going to be something that we're going to need to keep a close eye on, is that potential for flooding. Moving it forward, 18, 19. Sometimes the data takes a little time to load, but you get the drift. Is that the other part is that we got a lot of onshore winds, and this is going to pile up some water. Now, saltwater tides are not looking too out of bounds, at least to this point. But the combination of saltwater and freshwater is where that storm surge is really going to come from, that 2 to 4 inches of storm surge, or 2 to 4 feet of storm surge, rather. That is where that is going to come from. And so, we'll be watching that very closely as well as time goes on. Now, we do have a question over from YouTube, again, from Wesley Clark, and I definitely, this is a great question. Is there a possibility the warmer waters from the Gulf Stream might re-energize the storm? And that is an outlier. That is something that has been shown in some of the guidance. That is something that that we have to this point. It's not out of the question. I think that's the thing. It's not out of the question for this to potentially wobble and maybe get a little further to the east before it makes that northward turn. It's not terribly likely, but it may not matter because the waters off the coast of Georgia and South Carolina are also, the 80, 85 degrees. That's plenty. That's plenty there. So the Hurricane Center's forecast does show a little bit of strengthening before that second landfall. But again, we'll have to wait and see. There is a chance it may not go out over the water. That is also a possibility. There's a lot of uncertainty, with the track here. And again, what I'll do is I'll overlay the, get the that did not save. All right,
and
so
let me, the spaghetti models too. They fall them pretty tight, up to Cedar Key, and once it crosses, they kind of scatter. So
yes. So here's your again, here's your track from here, and this is again, this is as of 8 o'clock. 70-mile-an-hour winds, going to make landfall as a hurricane. But yeah, you can see how it kind of bends out and then has that landfall very near Charleston. Looks like it's taking aim a little bit more at Ondaw, but the exact location of the landfall is probably not going to make tons of difference. In the grand scheme of things here, just with the rainfall, the damage will be done by the time it makes landfall. And as you can see, these bands are already starting to try and come ashore as well. We even have some, again, we have some flash flood warnings here too. Zoom in on Charleston, we can show you that radar a little bit. You can show that radar image a little bit more, and you can definitely see the showers and storms starting to build offshore a little bit of activity coming in. And then there's the main event down here in Florida. And again, this is very likely, in the next, by overnight into the morning, we'll have a landfall somewhere here in the Big Bend. So, as Joseph mentioned over on the Carolina Weather Group stream too, let's take a peek at the forecast models. And yeah, there's really good agreement at this point. I think that's kind of tough to make out a little bit here. Let me take some of this off, but you can see that there is pretty good agreement, a very tight clustering of the models now, supporting the theory of a brief jaunt offshore before moving onshore. So that is something that we're going to watch. That's something we're going to watch very closely. The more time it spends over the water, certainly the more time it has to get a little bit more organized. And that's why, folks, I'm encouraging everybody in the path of this thing to get ready, even though the winds are not going to be have not really been the main thing that folks have been talking about. I'm still going to encourage y'all to, get ready for power outages. I think that's a very important thing to do. We need to be ready for power outages. We need to be ready. We do need to be ready for flooding. If you're living, low-lying areas, Hilton Head, Savannah, downtown Charleston, up into, Ondah, Georgetown, those low-lying areas, even further inland along the rivers, along the tributaries, creeks, streams. This kind of rain is not something we've seen for a long time, and you could see flooding in places that don't normally see it. So that's the concern. We'll have the onshore wind piling water in, piling them up the rivers. We're going to have copious amounts of rain falling on top, and so that's why. That's why we're quite concerned here. I think that's the main issue here. That's really what we're worried about, is that potential for extraordinarily heavy rain, and
Exactly.
what that could look like. So and tidal flooding too. I mean, again, we're still figuring out kind of what the tide contribution to the surge is going to be. Just got an updated forecast literally as we're sitting here that starts to indicate a little bit more explicit of a coastal flooding threat for Charleston come around 10 o'clock tomorrow night on Tuesday. So, or Tuesday night, not tomorrow night. Today was not Monday, and thank goodness for that. But yeah, I mean, this is what we're dealing with here, and again, this is going to be an issue really for the Low Country for several days. There's going to be rain in the Midlands. There's going to be plenty of rain in the Midlands. I'm sure we're going to see some flooding, beyond the fall line here. I can't imagine that we're not going to. So, again, a lot to think about, a lot to watch very closely over the next, really week. Debbie's.
I would also say one of the biggest things around here is at least North Carolina is also going to be trees because of ground saturation. I think that's another thing people should be watching for.
Yeah, trees. I mean, that's going to be an issue. I mean, you get a lot of that. You get a lot of rain, saturated soils. You don't need those tropical storm force winds necessarily to bring down a tree or two. Old diseased trees. I mean, 30 miles an hour, I'll get it done there. So, especially with these kinds of conditions that we're expecting and the antecedent conditions, a lot of spots, again, all the way from Low Country up into the PD, up into the Piedmont of North Carolina and into the coastal plain, have all had, pretty significant rain in the last day or so. So this is certainly something that we're very concerned about. The Weather Service is very concerned about it. Again, flood watches are up all over the place. We have a question. Do you think Greenville, North Carolina will get tons of rain? Well, I think tons are relative in this sense, but yeah, I think, Greenville, North Carolina, you have a very significant risk of heavy rainfall causing flash flooding. So I would be getting prepared. Anybody who's really, east of I-77 along and east of I-77, I feel like should be getting prepared for the potential for flooding. I think that's a decent demarcation line for where the greatest risk is going to exist. So that's what we're gonna, that's just what we're gonna have to deal with, and we want folks to be prepared and just be in a safe place.
I think it's also important, familiarize yourself with areas that, if you like. For me, I haven't lived in Greensboro for when we had the floodings in the late 2010s. Obviously, so I mean, I'm not as used to these rains as much as other areas of the other people would be. But I think even if you have been here for a while, just familiarize yourself with areas that do flood in town. If you can't remember where they do. I mean, that's probably another good thing people can do to get ready, just to be aware of what areas do and don't. So when you have to do something, not to go somewhere, um, not to go down X road or X, just to kind of avoid that kind of stuff.
Yep. And again, I think the most important message that we can have for folks is if you don't have to travel, don't.
Mhm.
Over the next few days, especially as this gets going, there's going to be roads and just there's going to be roads that may not normally have issues with water that could potentially have issues with
Right.
water. You don't want to drive through water of any depth, really, but especially if it's rushing across. Don't do that. That's just not that's not good. You don't know if that road is even there.
Yeah.
Washouts. I think we're going to see several washed out roads before this is over across the Carolinas. Um, Turn around, don't drown. I know it sounds kind of, it's like drown, and I can't drown in that, but well, it doesn't take much for water to start picking up your car. You only need about 6 inches to knock you off your feet. So there you go. Water is a very, very strong force, and it is going to be the biggest, most formidable issue with this system.
Mhm.
Now, the other thing that we got to keep an eye on too, especially near the coast, is the potential for a few tornadoes. As the center of the storm lingers, that's going to put southeast Georgia, southeast South Carolina into the northeast quadrant of the storm, and that's where the risk for tornadoes is going to be there. I don't think it's going to be a major outbreak or anything like that, but if you remember Idalia from last year, that tropical tornadoes can spin up and spin down just as fast. We saw a great example of that last year in Goose Creek, where a tornado touched down on Highway 52, picked up exactly one car, and then lifted. So those are hard to warn for, so we're going to have to keep an eye on that as well. So a lot to talk about, a lot to do, and it's going to be very, 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 it's we'll be talking about this one for a long time, and I think it's going to be a benchmark storm in particular for places like Savannah, for places like Hilton Head that haven't taken a hit like this in a while.
No.
Again, when we talk about October 2015, that was north of there. That was basically I-26 north into the PD. So yeah, so it's a rough one. I don't know how else to put it, but it's gonna be a rough time. And again, taking a look at the radar here in the satellite right now, over rain bands lashing Tampa, getting into Gainesville, kind of near Orlando. There's your center of circulation. There's your spaghetti models. Turn those off. Turn on the. I'll just leave that where it is, and that's the expected center. It's moving north at 11, and again is expected to make landfall. Somewhere in the Big Bend tonight. So
We've had a fairly good amount of hurricanes or tropical storms going through the Big Bend as of last
it's
couple of years.
it's been
Um,
really busy there, and that's been something that we are rather concerned about. So they took it on the chin from Adalia. They took it on the chin. I mean, really, they just really took it on the chin here. So so we're still going to be dealing with. I have a question in here from Florida, so I'm going to take that question in here on YouTube. I'm going to do my best with this because I don't know much Florida geography, but I appreciate helping me out here. But Pinellas County. Let me switch rate. I'm just playing with the radar here real quick. Let me do that, and let me get Tampa. Yeah, it's Tampa radar is going to have the best look at this, and don't want to see that. I do want to see. All right, and then so Pinellas County, you're still going to get so Freckles 83 asking on YouTube. Is this the worst Seminole Florida is going to get? And right now, where they are, as you can see behind me, I've got it zoomed in here. They're still getting lashed by rain bands, and it's going to be It's going to be there for a bit yet. I think if there's one good piece of good news here is that the center is beginning to lift north of you. So you're going to get, it will improve with time, but you're still in it to win it here for the next few hours. You're going to need that center to get a little bit further north so you can get some of that shear out of there. There are tornado warnings that have been popping up around Sarasota, just east of Tampa. So again, all these things that we're keeping an eye on here as Debbie continues to churn out here in the Atlantic. So let's talk timing here real quick, and again, I want to I want to emphasize for folks that we still have some uncertainty with this, but the best that we can tell right now, have a lot of questions from the Low Country, have a lot of folks in Charleston Metro that are concerned. So, the timing right now is we're getting some showers tonight. We've already gotten some showers tonight. We're going to get some rain bands starting tomorrow. Those rain bands are going to become a little bit more intense as we get into Tuesday. Tuesday into Wednesday is when we think that the best risk for any tropical storm impacts could be, but that's going to probably last into Thursday too. We need this thing to get ashore. And where that comes ashore is going to have impacts on how long the flooding lasts. That is going to have impacts on the tornado threat. It's going to have impacts on a lot of things. And we just have a lot of uncertainty around that. So I want my folks in Charleston to know that, who are watching on the Instagram stream here, which will be concluding shortly, keep an eye out, for, rapidly changing updates here. I think this is a situation where you're going to want to keep one eye on the weather for the next few days. And generally Tuesday through Thursday, probably good days if you can to stay close to home. I think that's probably the safest and the easiest path of least regret. Stay close to home. Don't travel if you don't have to. I know some folks are going to, I know some of you have got to go in. Some of y'all work in hospitals. Some of y'all work in, law enforcement. First responders, things like that. I think the only thing I'm going to ask folks is just take it easy if you've got to be out there. Keep those roads clear for those folks. So if you don't have to go in, don't. Keep them clear for those folks because they're needed. They're extraordinarily essential. And don't be a reason a first responder has to come get you. Stay out of the water. If you see water building up, turn around, find another way, or just retreat. That's kind of where we're at now. Having some questions about the weekend. Now we should have things calming down a little bit by the weekend. However, there's still going to be showers and storms. And we're probably going to be dealing with runoff from the rivers for a few days as well. Mm-hmm. So that is something that we're going to need to keep a very close eye on. Again, there's still some uncertainty there, but we do expect that by Saturday, it'll either have dissipated or started or picked up a ride on a trough and is getting out of here. But not a guarantee. Something that we're going to need to watch very closely. And again, it looks like that moisture is going to be hanging around for a while. There's a front that's going to be stalling. Another front will be stalling here, and that's just going to keep those rain chances in place, and we bring the heat back too. So we will keep an eye on that. Now, we do have a question about Western North Carolina. I touched on this earlier. Before we do that, actually, what I'm going to do is, for our Instagram audience, those watching on the Charleston Weather Instagram, what I'm going to do, I'll have an updated post here very shortly for you guys with just kind of a readout of the timeline, what to expect. Thank you for watching, and we're going to go. If you want to continue to watch, go find Carolina Weather Group on YouTube or Charleston Weather on Facebook. We have the full stream there as well, and see you there. And if not, we will be back with you tomorrow. So we're going to go ahead and end this stream here. Thanks all so much. All right, and we continue with Carolina Weather Group coverage of Tropical Storm Debby. We are in the process of, we're just continuing to watch the risk for severe weather in the form of a lot of rain, but we do have some questions about Western North Carolina, and I want to get to that here. And again, Western North Carolina, you're not going to be, I think it's going to be very track dependent for you. what I've seen on the models has not given me a lot of pause. I think is the way to put it. Not really sure if that's even the word that I want to use here, but what we're seeing out of the models, when I get into your risk is going to be, if there is a risk for you guys, it's going to be maybe later in the week. And there are some signs that there's going to be some rain up there, but it looks like, but for now, the models are keeping things relatively sane. The risk for, again, we think that the risk for any severe weather, flooding, tornadoes, et cetera, is going to be very likely along and east of 77 in North Carolina. I think that's the rough divider that I'm going to use.
I think your analogy is pretty good with that. I would agree with you on.
Yeah, at least so far. We'll see. Track adjustments could change this. So I'm going to urge everybody in the Carolinas to continue to watch this. Western parts of South Carolina and North Carolina, I think, are going to get away with this a little bit easier than those of us at the coast. But I want everybody to be continuing to watch this, because this is the kind of situation. Stalling storms are the most dangerous because, as we discussed, they are very difficult to predict, extraordinarily so.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't want, I don't want folks to get complacent on this. This is something, as long as it's spinning out there, it's something that we're going to have to potentially deal with. So a lot can change, a lot can happen. So we're going to just, we'll be keeping an eye on it for y'all. And we'll go from there. So another question, Lumberton, North Carolina, in that area, that is, that's something that we're going to have to watch fairly closely for rain bands, heavy rain bands. I think a flooding risk is more evident there. Was taking a peek earlier, the Weather Service office in Wilmington, which services that area. They are very concerned about a flash flood threat along I-95, Raleigh and Wilmington. That is certainly something that we're going to have to keep an eye on. So Lumberton and those areas, I think you're not out of the woods from this by any stretch of the imagination. Again, anywhere east of 77, I don't think you're out of the wood. You need to be really on guard for this thing. And if you're west of 77, I would still follow. I would still, monitor closely. But yeah, so with that, I think what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and sign off this stream. Joseph, any final thoughts?
No, I think you put all the nails in the basket, or analogy you want to use for it. I think just kind of, be on the mindset of, things could, are and probably likely going to change over the next couple of days. But for people on the North Carolina side, just, keep your eyes out, especially, Sand Hills, Piedmont area and coastal area, I think, especially, and treat it more of a rain event. Look more at the rain and tornado threat. The tornado threat is not as likely, but I think those are the kind of the main things just to kind of focus on.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed wholeheartedly. So, all right, folks. Well, we have a long few days ahead of us. I hope you have plenty of coffee, and if whatever libation you need to get through this, no judgment here from this end of the table. We get it. Do what you can to make yourselves comfortable, I think, is the most important thing, and comfortable, safe. Keep an eye out on the weather. We'll be updating on our YouTube channel. We'll be updating on our social media, all over the place. And yeah, I think that's gonna, I think that, folks, I just want you all to be safe. That's all. That's why we do what we do. We live here. We love you guys. Want you to be safe. One last question here before we go. So we have a flight attendant commuting to Philadelphia, taking a flight out of Charleston tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. and returning Wednesday night. Now, Wednesday night is going to be, it has the potential to be dicey. So again, I've identified that kind of in the dicey time frame. So we want, so again, we'll have to keep a close eye on that. There is a potential that, we could get some breaks in there, and you may end up getting a break. But if that center is really close by, that's going to, that wind and rain threat, especially on 526, is going to be certainly something to be mindful of out there. So with that in mind, I think this will do it for this stream. So for Joseph Navin up in Greensboro, North Carolina, I'm Jared Smith down here in Charleston, South Carolina. Be safe, friends. Stay prepared, but we're all going to be fine too. I think that's the most important thing, is that we will get through this together. Take care, everybody, and we'll catch you next time on another edition of the Carolina Weather.